This week's Parsha is Vayishlach, and we have the momentous meeting of Yaakov and Esav. And we have in number 1 the following. Vayisa et einav, he lifted up his eyes, that's Esav. Vayar et hanashim ve'et hayeladim. And he saw, now nashim can be translated as women or wives, ve'et hayeladim, and the children. So he sees Yaakov's ganze mishpacha, Vayomer, and he said, Mi eile lach. Who are these to you? So we'll come back with a better explanation, better translation of that later. Vayomar, and he said, Yaakov replied, Hayeladim asher chanan Elokim et avdecha. The children whom Hashem has, and chanan we're going to translate, but something to do with given or favored, your servant, i.e. me, Yaakov. So his question asked by Esav is, Mi eila lach, who are these to you? And the answer given by Yaakov is, Hayeladim asher chanan Elokim et avdecha. The children whom Hashem has something to do with given to your servant. So there are 2 particular, maybe 3 questions on which I want to focus. The second one is going to be, what's the meaning of the word chanan? Why didn't Yaakov say natan, given? So what's the meaning of the word chanan? Perhaps the third is what's really Esav's question. But the second, well, actually the first I'm going to get to, is Yaakov only gives half an answer. Because Esav sees the nashim ve'et yeladim, and he says, Mi eile lach, presumably referring to the nashim and the yeladim. And Yaakov's answer is hayeladim. He answers about the children, he doesn't answer about the wives. And this focuses the minds of some of our Rishonim. And I think I'll go straight to number 3. The Ramban says, Mi eile lach, sha'al ala nashim ve'ala yeladim, ve'ona hayeladim, etc. He asked, just as I said, and this is where I got the question from, not from me, but from the Ramban and others. Esav asked about the women and the children, and Yaakov answered, Hayeladim asher chanan Elokim et avdecha. And he answered that, and the Ramban is highlighting the fact that he didn't mention the wives in his answer. And he says this is derech musar. This is an appropriate way to behave. Ki lo ratza lomar shehein nashav. Because he did not want to say to Esav that these 4 women were his wives. Vehevin Esav shehein imot hayeladim. And Esav will work out that they are the mothers of the children. Okay, so why didn't he want to say about the wives? We'll leave that for a moment because we're going to see others who will answer that. So I'm sorry, we're going to draw the threads together one by one. Why he didn't want to mention that they are the wives, we will come to a couple of suggestions as to why that should be. But the last words of the Ramban, Vehevin Esav shehein umat hayeladim, Esav will realize that they are the mothers of the children. At this point, I'm going to ask people to make sure their phones are put on silence so we don't have a disturbance. I think I'll just I'll go out of order a little bit and go to number 5, to Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch is 700 years after the Ramban in number 3, whom we just read, and yet his explanation is totally complementary to the Ramban. Okay, if everyone could check their bags and their pockets and make sure their phones are on silent. Okay, Rav Hirsch in number 5 says, Vayomer hayeladim asher chanan. Yaakov answers, these are the children whom Hashem has given. Yaakov mazkir rak el hayeladim. Yaakov only mentioned the children. Ach teshuvato mityacheset gam l'she'ela al hanashim. But his answer also relates to the question about the women. How? We will come to in just a moment. Kach romez Yaakov. Yaakov hints, but idunot gedolah, with great sensitivity. Lahakarat todah mukuvelet, to give thanks doubled. He has 2 things to give thanks for. Hu zachar la'otzar shebiyadav. He's thankful, he's merited the great wealth that's in his hands. Begashmiot uberuchniot, both in physical matters and in spiritual matters. Hodot lachaste Hashem. He acknowledges, he thanks the kindness of Hashem. V'gam hodot l'nashav. and he also thanks or acknowledges his wives. And then the Rav Hirsch says, Legabav, as far as he is concerned, Hanashim heim amutehen shel yeladav. The women are the mothers of his children. Now, Rav Hirsch is speaking actually pretty much, as far as I can see, the same as the Ramban. It's just 700 years later, and he's writing in German, which is translated into Hebrew here. And I think what he means is, when he says yeladim, as opposed to banim, the word yeladim means people who are born. And who bore them? The mothers. So by saying yeladim, he's alluding to the role of the women, i.e. who bore the children. And, says Rav Hirsch, he's thanking Hashem by saying the words Elokim asher chanan Elokim, and he's thanking the wives by saying the word hayeladim, which alludes to the fact that these wives bore him the children. Okay, one at a time. Okay, so Rav Hirsch disagrees with you. Rav Hirsch thinks he's not ignoring them, he's delicately alluding to them. Okay, you don't like that answer? Yes. A very quick one.
Very, very good. That he doesn't trust Esau, and the women aren't there, and the women are hiding, and he's talking about the children because he doesn't have to worry.
Okay, so one of the answers we're going to see is that he doesn't trust Esau, and he doesn't trust Esau's intentions. But we can't say that the women were in hiding, because we have the explicit pasuk, the Yisayat Enav Vayad et Hanashim. Esau lifted up his eyes and he saw the women. So they can't be in hiding. There's a midrash that Dinah was hidden, and it reminds us of a story that Sarah was hidden, but here you can't say they were hidden. But you could say perhaps, and I don't want to preempt what we're going to read, but the reason he doesn't want to mention the wives is he doesn't want Esau to get ideas about them. But that's not what the Ramban and Rav Hirsch, who I think are saying the same thing, are saying. Right? The Ramban, going back to number 3, the last few words, Vehivin Esav shehein amot hayeladim. Esau would understand that they are the mothers of the children. Now, the Ramban doesn't give any more words. So it's up to us to struggle to understand the Ramban. And I think what the Ramban means is by calling them Yeladim, it's alluding to the women who gave birth to them. Okay? Not totally satisfactory, but that's what I think the Ramban is and Rav Hirsch is saying. Well, he doesn't use the word banim, that's my point. He used the word Yeladim, which literally means people who are born. That's what a Yeled is, from Nolad.
Children and these are the women who gave birth to them.
But I think because the word Yeled literally means those who are born from Nolad, I think that's why he chooses that word. I think at least that's what the Ramban and Rav Hirsch are saying. Let me move on. I'm going to have to be a little bit more ruthless about accepting and not accepting questions. I love the interaction, but I think we also need to make sure we move forward. Let's see number 4, Rav Avraham ben Harambam. So the Rambam was the Rambam, and the Rambam had a son called Avraham. And I've often heard it said that if Avraham were not the son of the Rambam, he'd be very much known as a Rishon in his own right, because he certainly was. But he's known as the son of the Rambam because that was his illustrious father. So the Rav Avraham ben Rambam says in number 4, V'heshiv lo, that's Yaakov, olav hashalom, le'esav al hayeladim, v'hishmatet min hatashuva al nashim. So our question, Yaakov answered about the children, but he missed out an answer about the women. Af al pi shahaita hashe'ela ala kol. Even though the question was about everyone. Esau lifts up his eyes, Esau sees the women and the children, and asks, who are these? Referring to the women and the children. And the Ben Rambam here in number 4 is spelling out our question, that Yaakov doesn't answer the second half of Esau's question. And he says, L'shnei ta'amim, second line, it's for 2 reasons. Ha'echad mehem ha'bayashnot lahazkir et yachas hanashim. One is embarrassment about mentioning his relationship with the women. V'hasheni, and the second reason is, sheka'asher hizkir et yachas ha'yeladim, when he mentions the relationship of the yeladim, sheheim banav, that they are his children, me'elav noda le'esav yachas imotehem shehein nashav. Then Esau will work out these are the children, using the word yeled, and I think again that's significant. No, but That's the Ben Rambam's translation. The original word is Yeled, which means Banav, but I think it's significant, but he doesn't use the word Banav, he uses the word Yeladim. So Yaakov will say, these are my Yeladim, and then Esau will work out that these women must be the mothers of the Yeladim, and it must be the wives. Okay, let's jump to number 7, which will answer the question that people are wondering, why doesn't he mention the wives? So number 7, actually we can start with number 6. We'll give one answer there and we'll give another answer in number 7. In number 6, the Emek Devar and Netziv says, Hayeladim, Sha'ata Ra'eh, Heim Asher Chanan, etc. The answer is, these children whom you see, they are the ones whom Hashem has given me. V'lo amar stam Asher Chanan, and he didn't say, just answer your question is, these are the ones who, Esau says, who are they? And Yaakov could have said, to save words, Hashem has favored me with these children. But he doesn't. He says, these are the children which Hashem has favored me with. So, actually, no, I'm saying it wrong. Sorry. He could have said, the question is, who are these? And Yaakov could have answered, Hashem has favored me with them. But he doesn't. He said, Hayeladim asher chanan elokim. That's the point that Netziv is making. And the end of line 1 of number 6, Shelo yachshov ki gam hanashim heima banotav. He doesn't want to, he wants to disabuse Esau of the notion that the women are also his children. Sharei lo hayu zokenot kamo Yaakov, because they weren't so old. We don't know exactly their age, but we can see from various indications in this parsha that they are much younger than Yaakov. So Esau might have thought that they were his daughters. V'yasa ayin lehistekel behem, and then Esau would have lifted up his eyes to gaze at them. And I think the implication is not in a wholesome manner. Ulai yisala atzmo, maybe he'll want to marry them for himself. Aval kasher piresh hayeladim, but when Yaakov used the word yeladim, hevin ki nashim heina imohot. So they're all saying, and I can hear a little bit of resistance here, and I can see a bit of resistance here. Nobody seems to like this idea that I think is borne out by many of our commentators, that Yaakov is alluding to the fact that they are his wives without mentioning it specifically. But here comes the Abarbanel, and this will give an answer. You might not like the answer, but it will give an answer to what's going on here. Number 7, the Abarbanel says, V'hinei sha'al Esav ala nashim v'ala yeladim. Behold, Esau asked about the women and the children. Mi eila lacha, and he says, who are they to you? Ki chashav ki hayu mehem nashav ubanav umehem krove nashav v'zulotam meha mitkabtzim etzlo. Esau sees this large group of people. Kanai Nahara, it's a big family, and he thinks some of them are his wives, some of them are his sons, some of them are other female relatives, and so from the gathering around them. Aval Yaakov lo diber mehanashim b'teshuvato. Yaakov doesn't mention the women in his answer. So this is taking a more literal approach, unlike the attempts we've seen to say that he's sort of subtly including the women. The Abarbanel says he doesn't mention the women. By the way, the first line was to spell out what's the question. The question is, who are all these people? That's the Abarbanel's understanding of the question of Esau. Who are all these people? Are they your relatives? Are they your sisters? Are they your daughters? Are you, etc.? Anyway, Yaakov doesn't want to mention the women in his answer. End of line 2. Ela mehayeladim bilvad. But he just wants to mention the children alone. Kamosha amar hayeladim asher chanan elokim et avdecha. V'haya zeh lefi shekisto klima panav shel Yaakov. The not mentioning the wives was to cover the embarrassment of Yaakov. Why was Yaakov embarrassed? Lomar shahayu lo arba nashim. To say that he has 4 wives. That's embarrassing. Pen yalig alav Esav. Maybe if he mentions I've got 4 wives, Esav will make fun of him. V'yomar, and he will say, Ha'ata hu tzaddik, ha'moshel b'yirat elokim. I'm sorry, we haven't got any more. We've run out of sheets. I'm sorry. If you can share with somebody else. Okay, there are sheets here. Thank you. Sorry, we just lost the thread there. He's worried that Esau will make fun of him. middle of line 4. V'yomar, and Esav will say, Ha'ata, hu ha-tzadik, ha-moshel b'yirat Elokim. But you claim to be the great tzaddik. You who live your life according to yirat Elokim, fear of God. V'lo nistapakta me'isha echat, or shnayim. You're not satisfied with one wife or two. V'halo ani, Esav. Behold, I, Esav, harasha. I'm the wicked one. Lo lakachti ki'im shalosha nashim. If you look at the end of the parsha, we have the whole yichus of Esav. We know he only had 3 wives. So Yaakov is embarrassed to say, I've got more wives, which implies I need more wives than you do with only 3. Continuing the imagined words of Esav, end of line 5. I, Esav, only got 3 wives, but atah hasafta alehem, and you've got more than that. Umibnei zeh lo hishivu ki'im mehayaladim bilvad. And because of this concern, Yaakov only answered his question about the children. V'yachshuv Esav shahayu katzat hanashim nashav ukatzatam menikot banav. And then Esav could conclude that of these 4 women, some of them are wives and some of them are wet nurses who are there to help with the child rearing. And so Yaakov doesn't want to spell out he's got 4 wives. So that is an answer. Maybe it's more satisfactory than some of the other answers. The Abarbanel meets head on the fact that Yaakov doesn't mention the wives at all, doesn't allude to them. And the reason is because there's 4 wives, and 4 wives, Yaakov thinks of himself might be seen as a bit excessive, a bit over the top, especially to Esav. Esav Harasha, who manages with 3 wives. And that, according to the Abarbanel, is why he doesn't mention it.
Abarbanel puts into Esav's mouth, he refers to himself as a Rasha.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if Esav would call himself a Rasha, but I think he's adding the little bit of color there. You're the tzaddik, I'm the Rasha. Certainly, I think Esav might have said, you're supposed to be the more faithful one, and I'm supposed to be the one who got passed over for the blessings. Something like that. But the Abarbanel puts it in a bit of a starker phraseology.
Was it not the custom? First of all, he had 2 wives.
Well,
He didn't have 4 wives.
yeah, okay.
And was it not the custom to have concubine, whatever you call them?
Well, okay, so first of all, you're right. Sometimes they are referred by Chazal as 4 wives. Sometimes they're 2 wives and 2 concubines. But they were all but they're all mothers of his children. And they're all people with whom he had relations. Okay, I think that's the point. And whereas Esav apparently, at least he only marries 3. He only formalizes 3. Yeah. Okay, so the answer to the question of why not mention the wives is the Abarbanel's answer that he was embarrassed to admit he had 4 wives because he thinks it doesn't look quite right, the right behavior for a tzaddik. Just by the way, I'll just throw out this. Before it was forbidden about the year 1000 by Rabbi Gershom, polygamy was allowed. But what's remarkable to me is how few instances we see of polygamy in the Tanakh. It clearly is not the norm. It's not the norm. Even though it was allowed, it wasn't the norm. And after the Tanakh, in the Mishnah and the Gemara, it's clearly not the norm. So I think for Yaakov to say, I've got 4 wives, I can understand the Abarbanel thinking that Yaakov would think it's a bit over the top. Yes. No? Yes.
I think it does describe Yaakov's state of mind as being afraid of Esav and trying to take a lower position. I think that does address that.
I think you're right, and thank you. And the context of this, the trouble of picking out one pasuk, even though I like to focus keenly on one pasuk here or one instance, is we do need the context as well. And the context clearly is he is bowing down, literally, to Esav 7 times, we're told. He's very much trying to appease Esav, trying not to give Esav any excuse to get angry. So I think you're right. This very much fits in. This Abarbanel fits in with that context, that he's trying to downplay anything that would give Esav any excuse to make a fuss. Yes?
He said, that's the feminine. Is Esav putting down Yaakov in any way with that? Is that l'cha?
I think it's not lach as in feminine, it's the pausal form because it's the end of the clause. So it's not lacha, it's lach. It's a funny rule of biblical Hebrew. Yes?
Maybe also from what Mark was saying, start explaining, I have 4
You're right. It's not quite the words of the Abarbanel, but you're right. It was a complicated family setup. As we know, he only really wanted one wife called Rachel, and then he gets another wife called Leah, and then they Bilhah and Zilpah come in. So it's complicated. Yes. That's not complicated. Okay, let's move on a little bit to the question of, we'll allude to the question of what's being asked, but the use of the word Hanan. And for the next part of the show, I want to focus on Yaakov's answer, Yeladim asher Hanan Elokim et avdecha. What is this Hanan? So the the Ibn Ezra in number 8. The Ibn Ezra starts off on the words Mi Ela Lach. We'll just read that. Mi Ela Imacha. Who are these people with you? Or Mi Ela Shalach Heim. I'll come back to that bit later. I think what the Ibn Ezra is saying with that second suggestion, I think it deserves a look at later on. But the first thing he says is the words Mi Ela Lach. You see, Mi Ela Lach. The problem with the words Mi Ela Lach is it doesn't quite make sense. What these to you? What's the question going on there? So the first answer of the Ibn Ezra is Mi Ela Imach. Who are these people with you? Who's this crowd? Okay, let's go into the second line, number 8. Hanan. Says the Ibn Ezra, Kamo Natan. It's equivalent to Natan. Natan means he gave. And Hanan, says the Ibn Ezra, is equivalent to he gave. And he gives other examples of how we see it used in a similar sense. Ukamoho, Hananu Otam. Now that's a pasuk from the end of Shoftim, just after there's been a war between Shevet Binyamin and the rest of the Klal Yisrael. And then there's a reconciliation. And then Shevet Binyamin need to have wives, and they complain. Chananu otam. It's actually in the negative, in the full quote. You haven't given them to us, or gam behem chinam. But then the Ibn Ezra says there's also an idea of chinam. Now, what does chinam mean? And he quotes the pasuk where Lavan says to Yaakov, "You shouldn't have to work for me chinam, for free." So the word Hanan, says the Ibn Ezra, has connotations of giving, but it also means giving for free. And let's expand that idea a little bit in number 9. So back to the Avraham ben Rambam, whom we saw quoted earlier in number 4 on the first question. Now it's the same ben Rambam on the second question. What's meant by the word Hanan? So he says, Umamro olav shalom, the statement of Yaakov, Asher Hanan Elokim et avdecha. Why does he use that phrase? Lefi sheha'amin shehem doron mimenu yitaleh. He understood, he believed that they are a gift from God. He's right, by the way. At this point, I want to say, every Jewish mother thinks their child is a gift from God, or every Jewish young man usually thinks they're a gift from God. They're actually right. They're actually right. They are a gift from God. That's what children are. And says the Ben Harambam, Yaakov uses the word Hanan to give, but give perhaps graciously, or maybe even give for free, like the word Chinam, because Yaakov believed that they are a doron mimenu yitaleh. They are a present from him, Hashem. Umatnat Chinam, and a gift for free. Asher mipnei anut notavnu, lo haya Yaakov medamer benafsho. Because of Yaakov's humility, he didn't want to suggest in his own soul, Shahu Urui La, that he is fitting for this gift from God. Shaharei Chanina bi'ivrit moreh al natinat davar lemi she'eino ru'ui lo. The word Chanina means not just giving, but giving to somebody who doesn't deserve it. Kamo bi'er ze abba mari zal. As my father has explained, B'moreh, in the book, The Guide for the Perplexed, which we'll see in just a moment. So, whereas the Ibn Ezra in number 8 said, Hanan is the same as Natan. I think you can allow, perhaps it's not exactly the same, even in the Ibn Ezra's mind, but he says straight off, Hanan kamo Natan. The Ben Harambam says that's not really what Hanan means, or it's not the whole story of what Hanan means. Hanan is a word that means giving something to somebody who does not deserve it. Or a matnat chinam, a present for free. Matna is something that is given from Natan. But the matanah chinam is a present for free, a present for somebody who does not deserve it. So Yaakov says, these are the children, Asher Chanan Elokim et Avdecha, not that Hashem has given, but Hashem has given to me who does not deserve it. And Yaakov, even though we presume he did deserve it, because he's Yaakov Avinu, in his modesty, in his humility, regarded himself or described himself as somebody who does not deserve it. Yes?
Chanina today is a pardon that they give to a prisoner. It's called chanina.
And it's not deserved, by definition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the Ben Rambam does from time to time refer to his father and says, go and look at my father's book and you can see what he's written there. So let's do that. He says, my father has described this word Hanan in this form, and he's described it in the Guide for the Perplexed, section 1, chapter 54, which we have here in number 10. And so the Rambam himself, now by the way, this is a translation from the Arabic, as is the Ben Rambam. So there are various ways of translating it, and this is one version. And he says in number 10, Kashinitan davar lemisha ein lo chok aleinu. When you give something to a person who has no claim on us, chok in the sense of right, kara ze b'lashonenu chanina. That's called in our language chanina. Chanina means giving something to somebody who does not deserve it. Kamosha Anamar, and now he quotes the same pasuk from Shoftim that we saw quoted earlier by the Ibn Ezra, the words chananu otam. And another example is our pasuk, Asher Chanan Elokim, exactly our words. And another example is the pasuk that comes a few psukim later, which we'll look at in a moment, Ki Chanani Elokim. We'll come back to that one. V'zeh harbeh, and there are many examples like this. V'hu yitbara yamtzi v'yanhig mi she'ein lo chok alav. Hashem creates and guides somebody who has no claim on him, lihimatziu v'hinhagato, to be created or to be guided. Ulezeh nikra chanun, and that is called chanun. So chanun, says the Rambam, and the son of the Rambam say, chanun is something, it's not just the same as giving, it's giving to someone who does not deserve it, giving for free. And in a minute, we'll have an example from our tefillah, which we might recognize that might guide us in what we're davening for. But let's see the words of, or the Torah referring to what Moshe did in number 11. Ve'et Hanan el Hashem, ve'et hahi leimor. So that is the opening words of the Parsha, Ve'et Hanan. And Moshe is recalling how he, Moshe, implored, let's leave it as that for a moment, Hashem to allow him to enter Eretz Yisrael. Because it had been decreed that Moshe can't enter Eretz Yisrael. And when Moshe describes his own role, he says, Ve'et Hanan el Hashem be'et hahi leimor. I, et Hanan. What does et Hanan mean? Let's look at Rashi in number 12. Turn over the page. Ein chinun b'chol makom ela lashon matnat chinam. Says Rashi, there's no chinun in every place. Take out a double negative to make it sound better English. Chinun in every place means a matnat chinam, a gift for free. A gift which is undeserved. And then he says, Afal pi sheyesh l'sadikim litulot b'ma'aseihem hatovim. Even though sadikim could make their claim, thank you, based on their good deeds, ein mavakshim me'et hamakom ela matnat chinam. They only request from Hashem something given for free, which is not deserved. So Moshe Rabbeinu certainly could have said to Hashem, listen, I've got lots of merits. I really deserve what I'm asking for. I'm asking to get into Eretz Yisrael, and you should give it to me. But he doesn't say that. For Et Hanan, Moshe describes his nature of his plea as Et Hanan. I was asking for something which I don't deserve. I was asking for a matnat chinam because Sadiqim do not come and claim that they have enough rights to what they're asking for. Sadiqim, on the contrary, say we don't deserve anything, but rather by using the word Et Hanan, which means matnat chinam, Moshe was saying that he was asking for something he didn't deserve. Okay, let's get a little bit more technical and see an interesting comment of Onkelos. So Onkelos translates our pasuk in number 13, and just look at the end of the pasuk. Banaya Dachan Hashem Yat Avdach. Just the end of number 13. Sons, children, Dachan, which obviously is the Aramaic translation of Hanan, for which Hashem has Hanan, given to your servant. Now, a few Pesukim later, in our Parsha, Yaakov and Esav discuss the present that Yaakov is giving to Esav. And it's a collection of vast numbers of animals, which are listed earlier in the Peruk. And Esav says, look, I don't need it. I've got lots of animals myself. Then Yaakov replies in number 14, Kach na et birchati, please take my bracha, my present, asher huva'at lach, which has been brought to you, ki chanani Elokim, because Hashem has chanani. V'chi yesh li kol, and I have everything. Just by the way, since I'm reading the pasuk, it's famous that Yaakov says yesh li kol, and Esav says yesh li rav, and they're very different. Someone who says I've got everything doesn't want any more. Somebody says I've got a lot usually wants much more than what they've already got. V'yivtzar bo v'yakach. Just to finish the pasuk, Yaakov implored Esav, and Esav took it. But what's interesting from our point of view is we have the word in the middle, Hanani. Hashem has given me, favored me, something like that. And look at the Targum Onkelos on that pasuk in number 15. And just in the middle of the line, we don't need to get stuck in all the Aramaic, just in the middle of the line, Arei Richam Alai Hashem. Hashem has Richam. What's Rachem? Mercy. Hashem has been merciful to me. Same word in Hebrew, but Onkelos translates in two different ways into Aramaic. In our pasuk about the children, Onkelos uses the word Chan, directly related to our Hanan. And in the second pasuk, in number 14, about the animals, Yaakov uses the word Hanani, but the Onkelos translates with the word Rachem, has been merciful to me. So I saw a suggestion that when Hashem gives something for free, that's Hanan in Aramaic. But when Hashem just generally benefits somebody, and with the animals, where did all the animals come from? The animals came from Yaakov's wealth, and Yaakov's wealth came from all his business with the speckled and spotted sheep in last week's Parsha. And that was Hashem generally not giving Yaakov something for free, but Rachem alai, giving him mercy, helping him with his endeavors in a more general sense. And if you look carefully at the various Pesukim that contain this word Hanan and how Onkelos translates it, it seems that there's two types of Hanan. There's Hanan, which is Hashem's Rachamim, Hashem helping generally somebody to prosper. And there's Hanan, which is a Matanat Chinam, which is a gift for free, which is not just part of Hashem's general help, but is a specific gift for free. And that's the one that Onkelos translates as Hanan. Okay, let's move on to number 16. Yes, please.
Number 13, the translation of Onkelos says Tachan Yud Yud, is that Hashem?
Yeah. As opposed to Elokim.
Rather than Elokim in the original passage?
Yeah, I think Onkelos doesn't distinguish. And the Yud Yud is not necessarily Onkelos. The answer is I'm not quite sure. Yud Yud is not necessarily Onkelos' own words. Yud Yud is like a kinui for Hashem, and it might have been put in by a subsequent scribe. So I'm not sure, but thank you for the question. Okay, number 16. Rav Naftali Hertz Wiesel. Now, Naftali Hertz Wiesel is an interesting character. I'll just give a little bit of biography. 18th century Germany. He was a maskil, part of the Enlightenment, which is often considered sort of the enemy of Torah true Jews. And indeed, in most cases, it was. But Rav Naftali Hertz Wiesel was an example of a maskil who was from. He was interested in wider learning. He did advocate for the inclusion of secular studies into the Jewish school curriculum. And like many maskilim, he was into Hebrew grammar and precise readings of Hebrew words, which we will see now here in number 16. For the full disclosure, he produced 4 major pamphlets in his life, and the last one was about Jewish education, and he was very strong on the involvement in secular studies, perhaps more than might be acceptable. And in that respect, perhaps he didn't quite toe the line in the last years of his life. But he wrote a perush on the Chumash, which is quoted by others and is valuable. And you'll see in number 16 how he integrates his precise analysis of Hebrew grammar and structure and syntax with an explanation of what Yaakov is saying here. So in number 16, he says, Vayomer, hayaladim asher chanan Elokim et avdecha, quoting the pasuk. Ilu lo sha'al rak im heim banav or yaladei beito, lo haya lo lamar ela banai heim. If the question had been, are they your children or are they your members of your household, i.e. servants, then Yaakov could have just answered, Banai Haim, they are my children. Just by the way, I missed out the Chizkuni in number 2 because I thought it wasn't all that exciting, but the Chizkuni suggests that is indeed Esav's question. Let's look at it now since I've referred to it. In number 2, the Chizkuni, Me'ela lacha, hayaladim ha'ela banecha haim or banei veitcha haim. Exactly the question that the Naphtali Hertzvizel is referring to and saying is not the right question. According to the Chizkuni, Esav is asking, what is the role of these young people? Are they your natural children or are they your servants? And that fits well with Yaakov's answer. They are the children whom Hashem has graciously given me. But if we go back to the number 16, Rav Naftali Hertzvizel, it's a bit of a schlep to say that every time, but he doesn't really have an acronym. If that had been the question, are these children your children or your servants? Then Yaakov could have just answered, Banai Haim, they are my children. Now, there is a precedent, it actually comes after, but there's another example in the Chumash where somebody asks, who are these to you? And Yosef is the one who's asked, who are these 2 children whom you have brought out? They weren't children at the time, but they were descendants of Yosef. Kamo sheheshiv Yosef la'aviv, Yosef answered to his father, Banai Haim, they are my children. And Yaakov could have answered Banai Haim, but he didn't because there was a deeper meaning to the question. End of line 2. Aval leperushtenu, according to our explanation, Sha'al al tiva'am. Esav wasn't asking who they are, but was asking about their nature. So this is the big Kiddush, and you'll see a new interpretation of the word Hanan, coming from Naftali Hertzvizel. Esav's question is, tell me about these children. What's their nature? What's their behavior? Heitiv lahashiv hayeladim asher Hanan Elokim et avdecha. Because that was the question, what's the nature of these children? It was good for Yaakov to answer in full, the children whom Hashem has Hanan, who has given graciously, given for free, et avdecha, to your servant. Now, here comes a new interpretation of Chanina, or a revised interpretation. End of line 3. Shachanina gedola hi shenatan li yeladim tovim ke'ela. It is a good, let's just leave it untranslated for a minute. Chanina, a great Chanina of Hashem, that Hashem gave me children like these. Yaakov here is being a Jewish parent, and he's saying, I don't just have children, I have wonderful children. And that is a chanina. Let me just finish this and I'll come back to you. That's a chanina. I'm going to translate that as a great gift. Maybe there's a better translation. But I think Rabbi Naftali Hertzvizel is pointing us to the idea that chanina is the noun for giving, is a great gift. It's not just a gift, it's a super gift. Because I have children like these. Line 4, ki heim tovim umaskilim. They're good, they're intelligent. Kol chavtzai bam, everything I want is in them. Va'al kein omar chanan. And that's why he used the word chanan, kederech hanani elokim chazdecha. As David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Hashem has favored me like your kindness. Shehi chaninat hada'at v'simchat halev. Because what David was asking for in that pasuk is the great gift of settled mind and happiness of the heart. Lahatzilo me'atzvat leiv ba'avor cheto, to release, to save David from the sadness of his heart because of his sin. I'll pause there. So what Rav Naftali Hertzvizel is saying, the question was, what sort of children are these? Are they good? Are they not good? Are they super good? I spent a long time as a school principal. I never met a parent who did not think their children were wonderful. Sometimes parents would say, I know he's not an angel, which meant, but he's a seraph or some other celestial being. But he's Mashiach. Anyway, so that's the question that Esav is asking his brother Yaakov, tell me about your children. And Yaakov says, they're super. And you know how I sum up their super? Hashem has Hanan. Hashem has given me such great children. It's a great gift. Your question.
My question is that is explain Hanan versus Natan, but I think Banav versus Yeled, because the way you explain Yeladim, that they were birthed by these women, that Banav would have been much more personal. They're my children. So although Hanan versus Natan, I get Hanan, but if that's what he wanted to say, why didn't he say Banai?
Well, maybe at this point I will defend the Ramban and the Rav Hirsch, who got a bit of a pummeling before, that Yaakov does want to allude to the role of the women.
If he wanted to say they're special and they're perfect in them, he would have said Banai.
Well, maybe he could say they are not just mine, but they also are a function of the women who bore them. And maybe their greatness and their wonderfulness is partly due to their mothers. And that's why he uses the word Yeled. Maybe. Yes.
I think my particular Josh on this is that it relates to Yaakov's thoughts and relationship with Esau. In other words, even as they're thinking of meeting, he's afraid that Esau's going to kill him, something terrible going to happen. And I think this response is a way of his bringing in God to emphasize, that if you start up with me, just keep in mind.
God's on my side. God's on my side. He's given me such great children. Okay, interesting. So,
a little more careful than you would ordinarily be.
okay, just for those who didn't hear, the suggestion is to contextualize. Yaakov is saying to Esau, don't mess with me. And don't mess with me because Hashem has given me great, great children to show that Hashem's on my side. Okay. Let's just finish off with number 16, because I paused deliberately. End of line 5, last word. V'chein tiknu ata chonein la'adam dat. And Chazal instituted, when they formulated the words of the Shemona Esrei, straight after we've thanked Hashem, or acknowledged Hashem's greatness, we hit the requests in the middle of the Amidah, and the first words of the request are Tochonein, La'adam Dat. So based on what we saw before we got to number 16, Tochonein La'adam Dat means you have given for free knowledge to man. And we should use it in the best possible way by learning Torah. Says Rav in the eyes of what we're learning here in number 16, Rav Naftali Hertz, it's more than that. You've given not just a present for free, you've given an amazing present. You've given us dart. You've given us intelligence and the ability to learn. What could be a greater gift than that? And the implication, therefore, of course, is we should use that gift and go out and learn. And then he says, line 6, middle of line 6, V'chein kan romez she'ayeladim ha'ela chanan oto elokim bam. And he's alluding that these children are the ones that Hashem has given favorably. In other words, that's the answer to your question. Esau, you're asking, tell me about these children. I can sum up how great these children are. They are a chanina from Hashem. They are a present from Hashem, but more than just a present, they are a super present, they're first class, and they're really, really good children. And then he says, end of line 6, V'ein sarech leperush the Rabbi Avraham ben Ezra. We don't need the explanation of the Ibn Ezra. Sha'amar Hanan kamo Natan. As you remember, Ibn Ezra said, as is Ibn Ezra's style, don't get too complicated. The word Hanan is equivalent to the word Natan. Says Rav Naftali Hertz, no, it is not. Shaharei Yosef Omar, Banai Heim Asher Natan li Elokim Bezeh. The full statement of Yosef, when on close to Yaakov's deathbed, not quite but close, when Yaakov wants to bless Yosef, and Yosef brings Manasseh and Ephraim, and Yaakov says mysteriously, who are they? And presumably Yaakov would have known that, so we need to find a deeper meaning for the question. But Yosef replies, B'nai heim asher natan li Elokim bezeh. He doesn't use the word Yeladim, and he doesn't use the word Hanan. He uses the word Natan. And I think what's going on here is the Ibn Ezra, as is his style, will say, it says Hanan here, it says Natan here. Don't get too excited about it. The Torah speaks in the language of man. Sometimes people use the word Hanan, sometimes people use the word Natan. What we're seeing here in Rav Naftali Hertz is a rejection of that. If there's two different words in a similar context, then there must be two different meanings. If Yosef can say Natan, and Yaakov chooses not to say Natan, but he says Hanan, it must be a difference. There must be a different meaning. And that's the meaning we've explained. Natan just means to give. Chanan means to give for free, but according to what we're seeing here, he gives more than give for free. It's a super gift, a very high-level gift, and it's a gift of children, not just any old children, but really special children.
So what's the Natan in Yosef's case referring to exactly?
Okay, so I'd have to go back and check what Naftali Hertzwiesel says about that Natan, but based on what I've seen so far, and this is not a complete picture, and I haven't done that homework, Yosef is not saying they're so special. They're saying they're ordinary.
But then all the brachas that
Okay.
our children are from a finite.
Indeed. Okay, we'll have to leave that. If I'm giving a shir on Parshas Vayigash, Vayichi, rather, I'll come back to that.
Apparently they're very special. Those children more special than
Correct. Okay, so that doesn't really work. So we'd have to come back on that one. Okay, number 17 is a bit of a different style. Number 17 is a midrashic approach, and I haven't got a deep explanation for it, but it's rather interesting and, as I say, very different, and I'm happy to share it. The Lekach Tov, which is really a compilation of midrashim. It's a bit late to be called a midrash itself. But the Lekach Tov quotes the following. Ma ra'a Yaakov Avinu lomar b'loshen chanina. Why did Yaakov use this expression chanan, or the noun form chanina? Lefi shechanina mutzaet b'birchat kohanim tetvav tevot. Because the word chanina, or an equivalent form, is in the very middle of Birkat Kohanim, which has 15 words. Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, etc. If you count all the words, you'll get to 15. And the middle word, number 8, with 7 before and 7 after, is the word v'chunecha. Yesh behem sheva mikan v'sheva mikan. There's 7 words before and 7 words after. V'chanina be'emtza. And chanina is in the middle. And if you don't believe me, here is the full Birkat Kohanim written out. Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ya Hashem panav elecha, then v'chunecha. And then Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. V'chunecha is, and you should favor him. Hashem should shine his face on you and chain you, give you chain, or give you chanina. And 7 words after. So we have 7, and then the crucial middle word, and 7 after. What does 7 and 7 relate to? Middle of line 3, Kennard Yud Dalad Shanim Sha'avad Bahem Bebeit Lavan. So 7 before and 7 after alludes to the 14 years that Yaakov worked in the house of Lavan. And we know the first 7 years were for Leah, and the second 7 years were for Rachel, or maybe it should have been the other way around, but that's how it worked out. So we have 2 distinct groups of 7, and we have 1 word in the middle of Birkat Kohanim, which is Vichuneka. So that's why it's a special word to use, because it alludes to the 7 before and the 7 after. Lekach ne'ema chanan. And that's why Yaakov the bracha uses the word, Yaakov uses the word chanan. V'chein amar Binyamin ben Levi b'midrash Bereshit Rabbah. Lefisha shama'anu chanina ba'achat asar shavatim. And there's another point. When Yaakov said this, when Yaakov made this pronouncement to Esau, he had 11 children. The last one had not yet been born. So every one of those 11 children, Dinah's also there but hidden according to the Midrash, every one of those children gets the bracha of Hanan. However, there's one who hasn't got it yet because it hasn't been born. V'adayim Binyamin lo nolad. Binyamin wasn't born. V'heichan ne'emar alav. And where is it said on him? Elokim Yahancha B'ni. When Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, and he meets Binyamin, and he says, Hashem should favor you, my son. That is where Binyamin gets his bracha of Chen, which Binyamin didn't get when Yaakov announced to Esau that all the children were a chanina, were a gift. That didn't include Binyamin, so Binyamin gets it, especially in a different context. Okay, that's what the Midrash says. As I say, in this particular case, I don't have a deeper meaning for the Midrash. I think there is one. I think there's particular significance in what it's saying. Not quite sure what that significance is, but I thought it's worth sharing because it's a very different approach to what we've seen in the Meforshim. We haven't yet seen Rashi. So where's Rashi? Number 18. On Esav's question, Mi Eila Lach. Rashi rephrases it as Mi Eila Lihiyot Shalach. Shalach. Mi Ela lihiyot shalach. What has Rashi done? He's added one word and one letter. And sometimes these very short Rashis are the hardest to really understand what Rashi's getting at. He takes the 3 words in the Chumash and replaces them by 4 words. The first 2 are the same, they're untouched. He adds the word lihiyot, and he puts a shin before the lach. What is he doing there? So we can see the Maharal, but it's a bit complicated. I'm not sure I fully understand it. I want to jump to a contemporary sefer in number 21 called L'Pshuto Shel Rashi, Kishmo Kenhu. It's a series of 5 books, which I like a lot, which gives you a simple, straightforward explanation of what Rashi's doing. The other Meforshim, the classical Meforshim, often give you an explanation of what Rashi's doing, which would not be considered simple and straightforward. But this book, L'Pshuto Shel Rashi, by Rav Shmuel Gelbard, who I think is contemporary, he says as follows, on number 21, Mi Eila Liot Shalach, quoting Rashi, Kafi Sharashi Mazbira La'ayil. Rashi's explained above, just a few pasukim earlier, Shalifamim Lamed Mishameshet Barosh Hateva Bimkom Shel. That sometimes you have a lamed at the beginning of the word, and the lamed stands for the word shel, which means belonging to or of. Let's just jump to number 22 and 23, where you can see Rashi expound this principle. In number 22, still from our Parsha, a few psukim earlier, Yaakov sends 3 delegations in the direction of Esau with gifts, and he also commands them what to say. Number 22, V'yatzav et harishon, and he commanded the first group, Lemor, saying, Ki yafkeshecha Esau achi ushalacha Lemor, when Esau meets you and asks you, saying, Lemi ata va'ana telech ulemi ela lefanecha. Lemi ata. What does it mean? Lemi ata. To who are you? Says Rashi there in number 23, Lemi ata, shel mi ata. Mi sholochacha. Who has sent you? The Targumah daman at, which means of whom are you? But look at Rashi's opening words. He takes 2 words, Lemi ata, and replaces them by shel mi ata. What's Rashi doing? He's just replaced the lamed with the word shel. That's exactly what he's done. No more, no less. And what does he mean? That lemi is equivalent to shel mi. And says the Pshuto Shel Rashi in number 21, Rashi is establishing a rule here that lamed is equivalent to shel. Not all the time, obviously, because that wouldn't make sense. But where you just see a word like mi ela lach, that can be explained as mi ela lihiyot shalach. The lamed is replaced by shel, because that's what it really means. So let's just finish off, go back to number 21. Middle of line 2. Afkan, here in our pasuk, the word lach, perusho shalach. The meaning of the word lach is of yours. How are they of yours? V'shir hakatav, and the pasuk means to say, Yodea ani shehem shalach, aval heim heim banecha or avdecha. As we saw before, the root really was the chizkuni that we saw in number 2. I know that they are yours. In what way are they yours? Are they your children or are they your servants? So lemi means of yours, or shel lach, or how are they of yours? So without Rashi, we might have been stuck because we wouldn't have understood what mi ela lach means, because as I said at the beginning, it doesn't really make sense. But mi ela lihiyot shalach, how are they to be of yours? I know they're yours, but in what way are they yours makes more sense. And Rashi is suggesting, or rather the Pshuto Shel Rashi explaining, is suggesting that Rashi says that Yaakov says to Esau says to Yaakov, I know they're yours, but in what way are they yours? Which brings me to an explanation I want to share with you, which I humbly offer as my own chiddush, but I rather like it, and I think it's it's actually rather precious to me, and it's a drasha that I said at my first son's bar mitzvah, and I've actually said many other times. And I want to suggest that this pasuk and this question of Esau's is similar to a point made in last week's parsha by Lavan. Lavan and Esau, they're not the same, but there is an overlap of their agenda. What might be described as the most terrifying pasuk in Tanakh is number 24. Last week's parsha, Yaakov lives with Lavan, raises a family, runs away, and takes his wives and takes his children with him. And eventually Lavan meets up with him, and they have an argument about who stole the teraphim, and they prepare to finally, on relatively good terms, and they prepare to depart. But Lavan says in number 24, Vayan Lavan, Vayomer el Yaakov. Lavan answers and says to Yaakov, Habanot banotai. The daughters are my daughters. The habanim banai. And the sons are my sons. V'hadson soni, and the flock is my flock. V'chol asher TORAH lihu, and everything you see belongs to me. V'livnotai ma e'aseh, and what can I do to my daughters? La'ela hayom, to them today, or livnehem asher yeladu, or to children whom they will bore. Why do I say this is the most terrifying pasuk? Because Yaakov's whole mission has been to raise the first Jewish family. We can see many instances in the Midrash and in the Chumash. Yaakov wants to have children. He wants to be Jewish. He wants the children to be his children. And Lavan comes along and says, you know what? You think they're your children? They're my children. They're my daughters. They're my sons. They belong to me. Don't think that you can keep them separate, isolated in some limited denominational Jewish life. They really belong to me. They are citizens of the world. And this is the antithesis of what Yaakov and every Jewish parent is trying to achieve. I would suggest that Esav is giving a similar point. And Esav says, Mi eila lach. Who are these to you? On what basis do you claim that they belong to you and they're not citizens of the world, like Lavan said? On what basis do you say they're yours? You want to raise them in this sheltered, isolated, frummy sort of environment. But on what basis? Let them choose for themselves. Let them experience the world. Let them belong to everyone. Mi elalach. Why are they yours? And that's the question that Yaakov answers. You know who they are? They're the gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me. And when somebody gives you a gift, particularly a chanina, a matnat chinam, or maybe we can say even a great gift, which makes them so special. When somebody gives you a gift, you say thank you, and you treasure the gift, and you look after the gift, and you treat the gift in the way that you think the donor would want you to treat it. If these are the children whom Hashem has given me as a matnat chinam, then I'm going to look after these children. And my looking after these children means I'm going to keep them away from you, Esav, away from you, Lavan, away from the dangers of the world. I'm going to raise them as Jews. That's my answer to your question. Mi elalach. On what basis do you think they're yours? I'll tell you what basis they think they're yours. They are a gift from God, literally, and I'm going to look after that gift, and I'm going to raise them as Jews. Thank you very much.